that the horizon within contains more signs than the horizons of the world. And this is the universal experience, not just of the Muslims, but of all of sacred humanity, that what is within is more interesting, more frightening, more dangerous, more astonishing. And this is one of the things that keeps people's motivation alive. That once they start to experience their religiosity, not just as stagnation, running on the spot, getting out of breath, but rather as a moving forward, once they put the vehicle in gear and make it go, so that they're not just activating the fiqh and knowing the doctrine, but actually making the thing shudder into life and take them forward, then they can never really lose interest. Then there cannot be stagnation and indifference and backsliding, because you start to see things, you start to see the scenery as it passes by, and you start to take a kind of pleasure in the skirmishing with the nafs. You start to learn the tricks of the shaitan and come to know the shaitan, and you come to view with a kind of ironic indulgence, but also real fear, the tricks and the snares that he sets for you. You start to gain a knowledge of the psychology of the enemy, and you see that his ruses are often immensely subtle, and the tricks that he plays on us, the ways in which he persuades us that particular practices should be abandoned, or that we should break the rules, or at least lean very heavily on the fence that surrounds the haram. All of those tricks that he plays with us, often using religious justifications to lead us towards what is clearly not religious. You start to figure out his motivations, and then that's when the kayd shaitan becomes da'if. Inna kayd shaitani kana da'ifan. Once you see through his ruse, then you can see that there's actually not much there. There isn't much there. He's persistent, snapping at our heels, constantly encouraging us to act as if we were going to live forever. But once you start to put the vehicle into gear, and you really start to live the religious life rather than just telling the world and yourself that that's what you're doing, once it becomes part of your most fundamental instinctual motivations in every situation rather than something that you have to regularly remind yourself of, then it becomes more interesting. Then you can throw the switch and light flows through the system, and then you start to see its wisdom. The Sharia, in the form of the Muslim life, can accidentally seem attractive from without. People like Islam as a lifestyle option, perhaps. Frequently they join Islam because they like the idea of wearing a turban or whatever it might be. But once you throw that switch and the light starts to flood through the system, and you enter a very strange and unusual kind of game, and you start to see that cause and effect are not cause and effect, but are simply different expressions of the direct action of your Lord, who always puts you in a situation in which everything is there in order to improve you, in order to reform you, or in order to tempt you. Every situation is a religious situation, not just occasionally. Then you can begin to see the true greatness of the Sunnah. The more you progress, the more you recognize the religious genius of the fiqh. At the outset, when you can't really imagine what the religious life is about, it is just a lifestyle option. But as you progress, then the motivation grows, because you start to see the greatness of this vehicle, and you start to get an inkling of the greatness of those who have made the journey. And that's when the real love for the Prophet ﷺ really starts to be activated in the soul. And this is a fundamental quality of belief. Not one of you has Iman until I am more beloved to him than his mother, his family, and all mankind. Plenty of hadith like that. And that's not something that you can just produce It's not like doing wudu or accepting a doctrine. Mahabba is from the heart, and it's always a sign of sincerity. You can do wudu and be insincere, but you can't love insincerely. And it's the quality of those who have made progress in this suluk that their love of the Prophet ﷺ increases. One reason for that being that as the eye within starts to open, they get a better perception of his greatness ﷺ. Not just his greatness in history, what he did, the overcoming of idolatry, the kick-starting of a great civilization, but the greatness of establishing a sunnah, a pattern of life that is all about suluk. And it's one of Imam al-Ghazali's great insights that he shows that every last detail of the fiqh is about purifying the heart. And that the fiqh is only about creating a righteous society and a righteous state through the divine permission that those things be established amongst the believers when they deserve it through having righteous and illuminated hearts. Actualizing the Sharia is not possible unless we have actualized it within our souls and then gained the permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have it actualized in the world. This is the only possible way of reading the Quran. وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. You shall be uppermost when you have Iman. And this is important for our situation because there is a lot of talk nowadays about iqamatud din, establishing the Sharia, and everywhere where it's attempted currently it seems to be a flop. It doesn't deliver, it doesn't endure, or it turns out, despite the extraordinary energy and the sacrifices that have been put into establishing it, not to come about. The reason for this is that if there is no suluk at work, if this inaba has not taken place, if this shunning the abode of beguilement is not in our hearts, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give his all-important consent that a community will be ennobled by the actualizing of his laws. Won't happen. It can't happen. And if people try to do it without having the turning aside from the abode of beguilement, as the hadith puts it, in their hearts, if actually they want to get into dunya in order to compete with others, if they see the ummah as a tribe amongst other tribes, if Islam becomes a kind of nationalism, as often it has become, then they will produce at best a miserable caricature, and at worst yet another opportunity for the enemies of Islam to get in through the cracks and to subvert yet another aspect of the Muslim world and of Muslim life. It backfires. Enter houses by their doors. The only way to have iqamatud deen is through this process of turning aside from the abode of beguilement, remembering death, love for Allah and His Messenger, the suluk, the whole difficult process of cleansing the stables of the heart. That has to be engaged in, this tazkiyah has to take place before we can hope for any success in our political, ideological machinations. And it's a sign of the ignorance of Islam that prevails amongst many Muslim activists today, that they're putting the cart before the horse and then wondering why the thing won't move.